Friend of mine for many, many years.
Thank you.
His brother-in-law, Alice's brother, was my classmate in high school. And he told me to make sure I get to know Cukie. And ever since I've gotten to know Cukie, we've had him back speaking here. This is the 8th or 9th time, I'm not sure how many. But we'll have him as many more as we can, for sure. And so tonight, this afternoon, I should say, he's going to be talking about oddities in the old town regulations. And you can just imagine what some of those were. You can read some of the town meeting records. We have those online, and you might enjoy perusing through some of those old records written back in the 1600s and 1700s. So without any more time wasted, we're going to turn it over to Cukie, and I don't think he wants the podium, he wants to stand up, I think. My friend. Welcome again.
You might be sorry when I get through talking about it.
No, I won't. Never, never.
Okay, my talk tonight is not what Bob said it was going to be. And that says one thing: you can't believe anything he says. I don't remember when, but it must have been a month ago. I talked with him and I had a story ready to go, and I told him that I'd be glad to do it whenever he wanted to, so he got it set up for now. And he talked to me about making a poster, and he made a poster and sent me a copy, and I looked at it, and it said that I was going to talk about Dartmouth and some Westport. So I got a hold of him and said, Bob, it's not right. I'm going to talk about Westport mostly and maybe a little Dartmouth. He put out another poster and said that I'm going to talk about Dartmouth and two subsidiaries, Acushnet and Westport. Well, that's what we're going on, but you're not going to hear anything about Acushnet because I don't know anything about it. I used to buy my chainsaw equipment at, I think it's Tripp's hardware store in Acushnet. And as far as Dartmouth goes, I stole this lady here 71 years ago from Duval's store, and that's about the closest I've been to Dartmouth. So anyway, whether you like it or not, you're going to, and if you stay, you're going to have to listen to something about Westport. My name is Carlton Macomber, or Carlton Duval Macomber Jr. I'm very proud of that name because my father was one of the greatest men you'd ever want to know. He was never rich, but he loved to help people that are in trouble. And especially during the Great Depression, he did help a lot of people. And then I came along on September 26, 1925, and we were living on Hicks Bridge Road, next to Hicks Bridge Road. We had a telephone, but we didn't have any electricity. It hadn't got there yet. So it was lamps for quite a few years in my early days. And the Macombers in the United States came from three brothers, William, John, and James. And I went into the National Archives and I couldn't find any other Macombers that migrated to the United States. The three brothers left Inverness, Scotland, to go to England because only English people could go to Plymouth County here in what is now the United States. well, they were not English citizens, so by living there for 2 years, they became English citizens, and they came to Duxbury in 1638, and they were all three were coopers. They made wooden barrels, and it was a very honorable thing to do in those days, because if you wanted to ship something by ship to somewhere, it better be sealed up, or you don't care if it gets wet. The decks on ships, when the sun was beating down on them, the seams opened up. And then if it rained or you took a sea over the rail, the water went right down below deck. So watertight barrels were very important in those days. And the Crown of England gave the brothers Oak Island off Duxbury, and it had wonderful oak trees for making the barrel staves. One other thing I did, I went into the archives of the United States and looked up the Macomber name, and there was a little lesson. That was about 2 years ago, and there was about a little less than 6,000 Macombers in the United States, which means that we didn't reproduce very fast. I think we probably got the most. We had 3 children in our family. I'm having trouble with my voice. Have been having it for a couple of days, so you're going to find me clearing my throat quite often. I have another problem. My wife is totally blind, and that's caused by 2 doctors that should have been sued, but I didn't want to get tangled with that. And now I'm going in the same direction. My macular degeneration was controlled for quite a few years, but now it's out of hand, and you got to stop that heavy smoking, I guess, or something. And eventually, I think I will also be blind. But I'm going to be 94 in September, and I don't think that's not a bad time to put into life. I was going to bring a flashlight, and I didn't. I don't suppose there's any kind of a light. How about this one here? Oh my God.
Are you going up there?
Whoa.
You have to. You want to hold it? You want me to hold it?
Oh, I can hold it.
Okay.
This will pay for your ride home.
All right.
We've had 4 people move into our little village, and there was one of them. 2 ladies moved into a house next to us, and they are super. I wish the whole town could be like them. And then across the street, we've got, is Sandy here tonight? I thought he was coming. Sandy and Jean Brown. He had a big business in Connecticut, and he's retired, and he is really pouring money into Westport. And he's got a big woodworking shop, and he's got a boat half built in it. He's got a big building with all the latest operating machines. It's really a pleasure to have those people around. Okay, in 1790, the town meeting in Westport voted to not support a black woman Dinah White, who was a slave for George White, and George died, so the lady had nobody to help her out, and the town refused to give her any money because she was black. Well, thank God we don't work that way today. The highways in Westport, because they were just dirt paths in the 1700s, but the highways in Westport are all maintained by the people who lived on each highway. And they got a reduction in their taxes for the amount of time they put into repairing the highways. The town of Westport did have little stone crushers run by small engines in different places in town. I can remember one on Sanford Road when I was a kid. I remember my grandfather driving off with a horse and wagon loaded with stones about head size, which you need to fit into the crusher. So they crushed the stones, and then they shoveled the crushed stone back into the wagon and went and spread it on the highway wherever it needed it. Which is another thing that is not being done today, but when I was a kid, the highway department in Westport made its own blacktop right on the road. And the way they did it, they went down the road with a dump truck with two men in the back, and they spread screened sand over the road. When they finished that, a tar truck backed down the road and sprayed tar all over the sand. And I said back down, it's not so, they went forward. But then the highway department crew came with another load of sand and spread it on top of the blacktop. Then a road grader that was towed by something went back and forth mixing it. And then one thing, I wish I'd bought it before I went to the junkyard, but a big steamroller came along and rolled that blacktop down, and they had a blacktop road, and everything came right. I don't have to read this one, but also another thing, when I was a young man, there was a man named Robert Gifford who ran for highway surveyor in Westport. And by the way, at one time they had 17 highway surveyors. And I presume that's because it wasn't easy to get around town. So each one had a particular small area to watch out for. Bob Gifford ran for highway surveyor and won. Next year, a man named Haskell, and I've forgotten his first name. I got something, yeah, you see it? A man named Haskell ran, and he won. And then the year after that, Bob Gifford ran again, and he won. And that went on for about 4 or 5 years, trading back and forth every year. It was a fault of the people, of course, for some reason. Now, if that doesn't tip over, everything will be fine. The selectmen appointed Jonathan Tabor, Jr. to be I think somebody's going to have to come up and read these.
I'll volunteer.
Can you speak loud enough so people can hear you?
Sure. What do you want to read?
Well, you read Jonathan, what did they say his
Okay,
name?
appointed Jonathan Tabor Jr. to be a searcher and packer of pickled pork and beef.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you going to say about that?
Well, I don't know what he did. I mean, it doesn't say exactly what he did. They had a name there, but it didn't mean so much to me.
8 men were appointed to look after the fisheries.
Yeah. Fishing was a big industry back in the 1700s. I say big, nothing compared to today, but it was a lot of small boats that fished out of Westport.
In 1791, the town voted not to hire a schoolmaster.
Yeah. A bunch of kids go learn by yourself, you know.
You said a lot of oddities.
Something like that. That's the only information in the town clerk's office in the history of the town. They don't tell you any more than what I've got printed on here.
There was appointed a committee to finish the townhouse.
To what, the townhouse?
To finish the townhouse. To complete.
Oh, finish it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something. The townhouse they were building is right in Central Village today. It belongs to the Catholic Church, but it was built mostly with materials that were brought in by residents. My grandfather took them a whole load of shingles that he'd been splitting. And that's how they made them in those days. They take like a draw knife and drive it down through a board, a timber rather, to make a shingle. And he sold them a lot.
Another action of the town, they voted that residents could catch, spelled K-E-T-C-H, oysters, to sell north of the rock at Lakes Island, and they could catch oysters south of the rock, but only for their own consumption.
There's one thing else that goes with that. The secretary of the Smithsonian down in Washington wrote a letter to the governor of Massachusetts. This was, of course, was later than what Bob's reading, but wrote a letter and said that the greatest oyster fishery in the United States was right along by Great Island in, not Great Island, Lakes Island in Westport.
Another action, voted to install seats in the townhouse. I think they had to stand up at the meetings before that. Is that what you
Well,
think?
it's a big house and take a lot of chairs. By the way, before they built the townhouse, all town meetings were held in people's houses. One man by the name of Elmy had a rather large room in his house, and that's where they had town meetings for a while until they built a building, put it in.
In 1793, they voted to hire a schoolmaster, 2 years after they denied it.
Well, the kids were getting dumb, so they had to do something.
They also voted to sell land on the east side of the Head Town Landing to John Avery Parker. Now, if you don't know New Bedford history, John Avery Parker became a very wealthy man.
Well, I'd like to tell you about John Avery Parker as far as Westport goes. He lived in Westport with his family, a wife, and I think he had a couple of kids. But I don't know what he did wrong, but it doesn't say anything in the records. But they kicked him out of town, threw him out. And it wasn't long before he was back in Westport building a shipyard. He got the money somewhere and he built a shipyard, and before long he had 2 more. He built 3 shipyards in Westport building ships. And the Parker Street School and Parker Street are both named for him because he lived right there when he was in New Bedford.
In 1794, they voted to purchase powder and balls and other military equipment.
Yeah, at the head of Westport is what we call the Powder House. It's in the middle of a triangle. Do you see any way to turn this off?
Like that.
The lady's not going to have any battery if I don't. There she comes.
She was worried. In 1795, they voted to allow Culbert Wilcox to build a house on the town landing west of Hicks Bridge at the pleasure of the town.
That building is still there and somebody lives in it. Now that's, close to 400 years. And they have the right to make him get the house off the property. That was part of the contract. But of course they haven't and they never will.
They also, in 1795, voted to remove Elizabeth Duvall to where she can be kept the cheapest. People used to bid to see who would bid the least.
I don't know if it's some of Alice's family or not. Because my middle name is D-A-V-O-L. Alice's last name was D-A-V-O-L-L. That's D-V, isn't it? D-E?
D-E-V-O-L.
Yeah.
But spelling was very variable in the old days.
Yep.
In 1795, there was voted to build a bridge over the river at the head of Westport.
There's one thing about that area. If you go to the head of Westport and get near the bridge, you will see downriver, maybe 100 feet, 2 ramps, one on each side, coming down right towards each other. And some people have said to me, oh, that's so they can launch 2 boats, one from each side. I said, I don't believe that. I think those ramps were put in before the bridge was built. And you could come along with a horse and wagon and go down one ramp, cross the river, and up the other ramp. The water's not deep there. So anyway, that's strictly my opinion.
In 1795, they also voted Drift Road was accepted from Hicks Bridge to the head. 17 highway surveyors were elected at that same time.
The Drift Road was originally Drift Way. Maybe somebody here knows what it means when you put way on the end of the drift name. Anyway, eventually W-A-Y disappeared and it's just Drift Road now.
In 1798, they accepted Lower Drift Road. You know Drift Road goes all the way.
That's where I live, on the lower end.
Right. In 1800, they voted that no loose horses or cows be allowed on Westport roads, but the same are allowed on the Horse Neck.
Yeah. All of Horse Neck, and by that means the beach, the dunes, everything out on Horse Neck was pastured for cows and horses. And the only regulation was they had to have a gate at the end, what we call the foot of the lane. It's the bottom of Horse Neck Road. You had to have a gate there so that people getting rockweed or seaweed could get in there to get it.
In 1801, it was voted that a man or a pair of oxen would receive 75 cents for a day's work, and a plow or cart, 25 cents for a plow or cart.
little
Big-
different.
Big money.
Well, they lived on it.
That's right. In 1803, it was voted $120 to support the schools. School budgets are a little different.
And there's quite a few schools in town because people couldn't travel very far, so they built little schools here and there.
In 1804, here are the fees charged for the use of the head town landing for shipping or receiving lumber and wood. 1 quart of wood, 4 cents. 1 ton of timber, 4 cents. 1,000 feet of boards, 4 cents. 1,000 feet of 2-inch planks, 8 cents. This money was for maintenance of the landing.
Maybe you've noticed that they had a Westport. There are stone walls each side of the river for quite a distance. Those were put there so barges could be towed upriver and moored to that wall, those walls, and loaded with goods to ship out. Because you know, going over the road was not a great thing to do in those days. I mean, the roads were rough and full of holes and what have you. And going by boat, it was easier to do. It took a little longer maybe, but they shipped a lot of stuff in and out of the head of Westport on those walls.
In 1804, William Almy was the most prominent man in town. He was on many boards and was mentioned at every town meeting. He's kind of considered the father of the town.
And I'm wondering if it had anything to do with the Almys that lived in Dartmouth, right at the Westport line down at Horsneck.
Yeah, they're all related, actually. They're Almys on Old Westport Road also, and
Okay.
Cummings House.
Yeah,
But there were lots of them down in Westport. They're originally from Portsmouth.
yeah.
It was voted to allow people to fence in Horseneck for pasture, but they must allow others the right to get seaweed. You may want to explain why they wanted seaweed.
Well, my father as a teenager worked for our cousin, sure, that's the guy, Everett, anyway, he had a farm on Main Road, and my father and did anybody know Lee Stevens, a black man at Westport Point? He is unbelievable, one of the nicest men you'd ever know. He and my father used to go get seaweed to put on Everett's fields. They had a horse and wagon, and they went to the bar that left Horseneck and went over to Gooseberry. They could only go at half tide. You had to wait till the tide got down to half, and then they went across. And then they had to get back before the tide got any higher than half, because the horse would have a problem with it. But I found out a few years ago from someone who knew that seaweed is a mulch. It doesn't give you any benefits as far as growing stuff. So, but they thought it was great, I guess, and they used it.
What else did they use seaweed for?
They use it for insulation too, didn't they?
What's that?
Didn't they use it for insulation around?
Oh, yeah. We had a fire at River Road in Westport, that's down towards Westport Harbor, in the apartment house there. And it was in the petitions, and how it got going, we don't know. But anyway, we started ripping off shingles, and there was a sheet of metal underneath the shingles. So we had to get axes and chop the metal out, and on the other side of the metal was seaweed. And it was piled in that petition all the way to the second floor. And I guess it must have worked pretty good.
I think they used it for clam bakes too, right?
Oh, yeah. Rockweed is very necessary for a clam bake.
Okay, in 1804, both branches of the river were called a Coxet, not the Westport River, the Coxet River.
Right. And it's an Indian name, and I don't agree with what you just said, though. A Coxet, as I've heard it, is the West River. The East River is Nokachoke. And the word Nokachoke in Indian, so I've been told, means high banks on each side. And the East River does have high banks on each side.
In 1805, Benjamin Brownell, the tax collector, was arrested for not collecting all the taxes in 1802 and 1803. The sheriff placed him in jail in New Bedford. His properties were held by the town. Eventually, he was released when the taxes were collected with interest.
And somebody who seems to know about that particular case said it was only a few dollars, but he didn't collect it all, so he was arrested. Who wants to be tax collector?
It also, in 1805, it was voted to control the number of grog houses in town. Decided that 4 be allowed, only 4
Yeah, in the whole town.
in the whole town.
You know what a grog house is, I hope. Beer, wine, whiskey, whatever.
In 1807, 25 highway surveyors were elected.
Yeah. That's because of transportation, they only had small areas for each one.
Okay, do you have any more here?
My arm is stuck to it. Okay, I got some that's not on the list there.
Okay. Well, I won't hold that list.
Does anybody here know about the Coast Guard Reserve temporary? Boy. Well, it was about 1942 that President Roosevelt ordered the Coast Guard to protect the shores, the ocean shores of the United States. He was worried about saboteurs coming in from a submarine and blowing up a mill or something, you know, like that. So the Coast Guard went ahead with it. And in order to be a member of that reserve, you had to be a member of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. So here in Westport, we had quite a few guys who were members of the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and they chose me and Calvin Hopkinson and Norman Roylance to go right into the Coast Guard Reserve, which we did. We had to go to the State Pier in New Bedford and run through the whole physical and be fingerprinted and I don't know whatnot. And as soon as we were through with that, I started patrolling New Bedford Harbor, which was not much fun because no lights were allowed to show in the city. And you couldn't put the lights on the boat. You had to find your way around. And I think saboteurs in a rubber boat could probably have sneaked in anyway. And I wouldn't be able to find them. Now, Calvin Hopkinson went on an offshore boat. It was a 50-footer. And they patrolled all night up and down the coast here. And then the Coast Guard said, we need men patrolling the shores. So we organized Flotilla 618, the Coast Guard Reserve Temporary, and 3 of us went to boot camp for 2 weeks down where the Mass Maritime Academy is today. And we learned to handle machine guns and .38 pistols and talk by semaphore and Morse code, and they really pushed us hard for 2 weeks down there. And then we had to come back and train the rest of the guys with the same thing that we learned. The Coast Guard was very generous in many things. One was clothes. I had a complete officer's uniform, and so did many other guys have complete officers. Yet I was not an officer. I was a CBM, Chief Boatswain's Mate. And we also had undress blues, which we used when we were working on things. We had, similar to LL Bean boots, we had Endicott Johnson shoes. We had sheepskin jackets, heavy ones. Oh, there's probably a lot more that I'm not thinking of right now, but anyway, we set up shop in the top floor of Lee's Wharf. There was bugs up there, so a man could sleep in between his patrol. And then we proceeded to patrol Horse Neck Beach all night long. And each man had a .38 pistol. One man had a riding machine gun. Another man had there's only two, by the way. I keep saying another man. There's only two in a group. Another man had a big searchlight. It was heavy. But we had orders never to turn it on. So what the devil do we carry this thing for? Anyway, we did what we were told to do. And one man had a very pistol. That's the one that fires flares up in the sky. And it so happens that every one of my patrols was with Milton Earl. Does anybody remember him? The annex of the town hall in Central Village is named for him. He was a former Navy man in World War I, and he was superintendent of schools for many years. But he told me, he says, I don't want any of these guns, I just want that very pistol. I said, oh yeah, why? He says, if I see a saboteur coming ashore in a rubber boat, he's going to get a flare right in his face. And I guarantee you he'll turn around and start paddling in the other direction. Okay, so he wouldn't carry a gun. We had a muster about 1944 on Boston Common, and we had over 5,000 men on Boston Common, all in uniform, but they came from all over New England. And I have a nice picture that I don't think it shows more than 1,000, but a bunch of them standing up to have the picture taken. And we never met any saboteurs, but I can understand the president. It could happen, and our patrols might have stopped something from happening. Oh yeah, at the end of Horse Neck Beach, there was a key hanging on a post, and we had a heavy cast iron time clock. You had to put the key in that and turn it to show that you did make the patrol. What else did I have in mind? Oh, if anybody here has something they would like to say, I'm ready for it. Yeah.
On the definition of a thriftway.
I'm going to come down there so I can hear you better. My son fixed my hearing aid, and I walked out of the house with it laying on the dining room table. But that's what 94 years does to you. Oh, you're... This is my buddy. I didn't know he was here. You know what he is? I'm 94. He's 102. Huh?
101.
Oh, you haven't got to 2 yet? No. I thought you were 102 now.
No, but what I want, you mentioned Driftway.
Yeah?
My wife's father told me that the definition of a driftway was that it was a private way, but the farmers along the way were allowed to put gates across it to control their livestock. So if you used the way, you had to stop and open those gates as you went.
Yeah.
Jordan Road was the same. Jordan Road was a driftway.
Yeah.
And his father used to tell about when he was a boy going to school up here in this building. He used to climb over the gate rather than.
Yeah. We need you up here talking. You could tell us lots of stories.
Well.
Here's a guy here that was going to college out west, western Massachusetts, and he had not a LaSalle, right?
Going to college?
What was the big car you had when you were in college?
1923 Dodge.
Nah, the one you made into a 3-cylinder,
Oh,
4-cylinder.
No, that was, well, you're getting two things mixed up. When I lived out in New Salem, I had a Lincoln.
That's it, Lincoln, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the car had 8 cylinders and it burned a lot of gas.
Yeah, so
So Horace figured, I'll fix that. He sat down and went to work on a piece of paper on what he should do, and he removed just 2 cylinders?
4 cylinders.
Huh?
I removed 4 cylinders, so it became a 4-cylinder.
Removed 4. He said he saved a lot of gas, but he had to keep shifting going up hills. And he's got the nicest collection of antique cars. So your birthday is pretty soon, isn't it?
No, it's in May.
Oh, it's gone by.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll be 101 for quite a while now.
And you know, he's still driving at 101. So it isn't how old you are, it's what shape you're in.
The gym, too. Cukie, I have something I want to share. It's an oddity in local government. Before Westport was carved out of Dartmouth, one of the rules in the town rule book had to do with yoking geese. Can you imagine detailed instructions for how to yoke a goose? Because the geese were getting into people's gardens and the yokes would keep them from going through fences and stuff like that. So I can recommend, if you want to read that stuff, read the town meeting records on our website. And it talks about yoking geese as well as what you would pay if your goose got in my garden and I picked it up. You'd have to get it from the pound keeper and you'd have to pay and I'd get the money. And the pound keeper would get a piece too. Did you hear that one before?
No. You know, I had it right there and you wiped it out. You know, I can remember anything from, say, 1960 back to the 20s. But I get out of the cellar to get something, I have to come back and ask my wife, what the heck was I down there for? I had something I was going to say right now, but...
Well, I'm going to share something. One of the last times I went to visit Cukie down on Drift Road, I went to the house and he was outside. His son said, I think he's out in the garden. He was rototilling the garden, this guy, 93 years old at that time.
Well, I'm still doing it.
Yeah. He chops wood also.
Huh?
You still chop wood?
No, I cut it with a chainsaw and I split it. We heat our house with wood. It takes 4.5 cords a year to heat our house. Although things are a lot better, we put in solar panels a year ago, and we haven't paid 1 cent for electricity since we put the panels up. Somebody said, oh, in the wintertime you're going to have trouble. We never paid a cent all winter long. And we have a huge credit there, so that if for some reason we lost all of our electricity from the producer, we could go a long time just on the extra that we've been putting into the system.
If my memory is right, didn't you fly a seaplane at one time?
What's that?
Did you fly a seaplane?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Among other things.
Yeah,
Seaplane landed on Westport River, right?
yeah, and a J3 Piper Club on Edo floats. And it was a seaplane. And I could land in it. I go to Cuddy Hug and land right in the pond and go ashore and so forth. But the 54 hurricane destroyed it. The plane, I would say that to the top of the fuselage, it must have been about 7 feet above the floats. And 2 other guys and myself went down there to fill the floats with water because we knew there was a storm coming, supposed to blow 55 miles an hour. And we figured, hey, that's only a light plane. We've got to do something about it. So we filled the floats with water. So there's about a ton or so of water holding the plane down. But we got that done, and we got ready to leave, and we couldn't. The water in one place on the river was right over the road so high that we couldn't drive through it. So we were stuck in the sand dunes through the whole hurricane. And I watched the water come up over that plane, and I watched my swordfish boat. A big wharf came floating up the river and cut the mooring line off. And that went into the bridge stern first and smashed all to pieces. I sat down and bawled like a baby. Anyway, we've done fine since.
Now, if we have any questions, please feel free. We're going to break now and have our refreshments. But I thought you would enjoy Cukie, no matter what he brings to talk about. Even if I screw it up in advertising it, it's always good anyway. And he usually calls me and says, I'm ready for the next one. So enjoy, look at our website to see some of the things he's done before, because he never tells the same story twice, except how he got his name, Cukie. But other than that, they're all different stories. So enjoy them and enjoy the refreshments. And
Back in 1937, I was in the 5th grade at the head school, and I walked into the yard out of the bus one morning, and a kid by the name of John Gavush, he was my buddy for quite a few years, walked up to me and says, "Hey, Cucumber Macomber." Well, the other kids heard it, and let me tell you, I suffered. They kept yelling at me. But by the time I got to high school, I signed my papers Cukie, and the teachers all called me that. And I've had it ever since.
Alice calls him Cukie now.
No, she calls me Cuke.
Cuke.
Well, she's getting too old to say too many words, too many letters in a word.
Anyway.
Are you listening to him, Alice?
Am I listening to him? I've been listening to him for a long time.
Thank you.
And